Welcome back to the big show. Leah McLean is filling in for Elizabeth today, and we're sitting down with Jody Terzich and Shannon Ort from the law offices of Terzich and Ort to answer all of your questions about divorce.
Okay, the next question came from a Twin Cities Live viewer. She asked, does the state of Minnesota favor the mother or the father? Whose rights do they favor? Okay, let's bring it to the experts who we have here right now. State of Minnesota, okay, they don't favor mom or dad, do they? It should be somewhat equal, right?
They do not. In fact, there is no gender bias built into the statute.
Right.
We have factors that we consider, but none of them are specific to gender.
Gotcha. So why, because I actually felt like there was some sort of bias, or they lean towards it. Why is there that idea, that myth out there that states, not just Minnesota, but other states favor the man or the woman?
I don't know. Because clearly that's not what we have. We've got what are called the 12 best interest factors, and they are 12 different things that the court has to consider, and none of them has to do with gender.
No kidding.
Okay.
No kidding.
So the court is going to look at probably, always, I would think with children, who is in the best interest? What's in the best interest of the child? Is it spending more time with mom, spending more time with dad, splitting it equally? And that's what the court really wants to take into account.
Absolutely. As we look at these factors, we look at them through the lens of a best interest standard, is what we call it. So, and we look at historical parenting, and we look at, who has the ability and knowledge, and where are people going to live, and what have they historically done to care for kids? Where are kids' comfort zones? Where are their friends? Where's their community? And we try to keep things as stable as possible for children as they go through this destabilizing process.
So really, regardless of who is kind of, quote, at fault, or who is the one filing for the divorce, none of that really matters according to the courts. They're just like, okay, if you have kids that are involved, let's look at them first.
Correct. We are a no-fault state, and when it comes to children, best interest. So how do I maximize the time with mom? How do I maximize the time with dad? Are there any chemical dependency issues that we need to be aware of, and are you treating those? Are there mental health issues? Do the kids have any special needs? Really, what are the needs of the children, and how do we bring this family together to meet those needs?
Okay. So when you guys look at Jody mentioned the 12 little aspects, like, are there a couple that we really need to kind of dig into? I mean, nobody's going to memorize all 12, but are there a couple that okay, you really need to know these couple points?
So the good thing about the statute is it specifically says not one factor is determinative. So as you look through the factors, you can say, all right, this is one where maybe mom has a leg up, and this is a factor that maybe dad has a leg up. But overall, we assess the factors and just look at overall what is the global picture. But typical kind of factors that I typically hone in on initially are kind of the historical parenting time, because that's what your kids live day in and day out, right? Who gets them up for breakfast? Who picks them up after school? Who transports to the extracurriculars? Scheduling doctor's appointment, right? Their day-to-day life, because that's what now that doesn't mean that just because I've historically done that my husband or partner is unable to fulfill those tasks. It's just who has done it, and then what is the person's capacity to be able to do it if we're now in separate homes.
Okay. So what is the enforcement of that? Like, how does that look? If it's I don't know how they break it down percentage-wise, but they say, is it by days? Is it by, okay, you get 70% of the time, 30% of the time? Like, how is that sort of laid out, and what are the guardrails for that?
So really, it's the discretion of your judicial officer. So your judicial officer is going to look at those 12 best interest factors, and it's not like if you prevail on factor one, that gives you 10% of the time, right? No, that person is going to decide based upon their assessment of those 12 best interest factors, what that means the parenting time should look like. So if you want to be in control of those decisions, right, you have the opportunity to do that. As soon as you are in dispute, then you're letting somebody else who doesn't know your family, doesn't know what the priorities are for you and your spouse to make those really tough decisions. And they may prioritize one of those factors over another where you might not have.
Well, that's a really good point, because not everybody needs to go before a judge and let someone else make these choices for them. The families and all their unique pieces can come to these agreements with the help of their legal team and figure these things out themselves before they have to go to a judge, right?
Not only can they, but they should, right? The idea of having a stranger weigh in with their own background and biases and values into what's best for your kids who they've never met and they're never going to meet, right, is just completely not family friendly. So reaching decisions and trying to customize schedules and agreements to meet the needs of your family is ideal.
Okay, so speaking of strangers, let's say you figure all this stuff out. You do it, and it's like all copacetic. You don't even have to get the judge involved. And then somebody meets somebody else, and they bring somebody else in their life. You know, whether it's the man or the woman, they bring somebody else. Do you then have to like go back to the table with some more information? Like, okay, I either approve of this person, or like, how does that work out when you bring kind of a stranger into these kids' lives?
So we're looking for consistency for families and stability. And so no, that wouldn't necessarily change the designations. That wouldn't change what the parenting time looked like. If there are substantial changes, I'm staying here in Minnesota and the parent moves to Florida, right? Like that may be something that we would then have to go back to the table. But meeting a new spouse, meeting a new partner, that shouldn't change things generally.
Yeah.
But parents always have an opportunity to sit down and have a session to discuss kind of what's appropriate for a 5-year-old may not be appropriate for a 12-year-old. And let's talk about how do we, and they're in new sports and they're in, traveling something, and somebody's schedule may be more conducive to that. So just knowing that your divorce and the process lives and grows with your kids is really an important thought.
Well, good stuff as always, you guys. Good to see you.
Thank you both for being here.
Happy holidays. Hopefully it's stress-free and fun, you guys. If you guys need advice about anything related to divorce, Jody and Shannon are here to help you. And if you have a question for the legal team, please reach out. We may just address it in a future segment right here on Twin Cities Live. So we have their contact information on our website, Twin Cities Live.